All right. And we're back with EUC off the record. And today I've got somebody really cool. When I got a chance to hook up with him and maybe talk with him for a little bit. A lot of you have seen his demos. Probably anybody watching this has seen a demo by this man, but you might not know it. Rich, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, sir?
Thanks, Ron. Richard Parnell, I've been with Citrix a very, very long time.
Very long time.
22 years, I think it is this year. So, yeah, as you said, I've been the demo guy.
You
I've been
not
the,
not 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 a demo guy. At Citrix when I showed up after all the years of being kind of I was an instructor and I was always in the community, but I was never an employee. The second I was an employee, oh, you guys are going to do a demo? Oh, you have to go talk to Rich Parnell. That was it. There was
that
no,
was it.
yeah, that was it. You had to go see you. And all the keynotes, all the big stuff, you were involved in all of those since like what, 2006 we were talking, 2005?
Yeah, yeah. So it's really interesting because when I first started at Citrix, I was a support guy. So I
Yeah,
was on the phones, talking to partners, taking support calls, putting them back in the channel so that they didn't, come back to me again.
yeah.
All those kind of things. And we had an EBC in ANZ,
Mhm.
which was really, really cool. We had this room, it was round, it had it had thin clients in it, and we did demos, right?
Yep.
We did live demos of all this stuff. And it was really interesting because when we made the acquisition of Zen Server back in the day with Simon and all those guys,
Mhm.
they made me put together a half height rack of servers. And I wheeled this thing around ANZ, Singapore, all the analyst conferences at the
Yep.
time. And the demo of the day was to pull the plug on Zen Server and watch it fail over gracefully. So I think everybody remembers that demo from back in the
Yep.
day, right?
Yep. Yep.
And in the room is Gordon Payne, Simon, the other Simon, all these guys for the analyst conference. And they see me do all these demos. And Gordon turns around and he goes, "We are picking up that rack. We are shipping you to Arizona to the big analyst conference. And you're going to hook up with a guy called Brad Peterson."
Ah, Brad Peterson. All right.
Absolutely. And Brad at the time was doing demos for Mark and setting up the demos for Mark. And this was awesome. So I rock up with this rack. Brad has no idea who I am. There's no warning around any of this stuff. And I kind of walk
And
in and go,
and
Gordon
we should
said,
put some of these names in context.
we
Rich is
should.
talking about Mark. Brad is doing this for Mark. Mark was the CEO.
This is
It
Mark
was
Templeton.
this is
Like,
Mark
this is the
Templeton.
grandfather of EUC.
Exactly. And Brad Peterson is not just some support guy walking around setting up stuff for Mark.
Oh no.
So these are the big names now, and you're just rolling a rack up to
I'm literally rolling, a 14U rack kind of
them.
thing down the aisle of this convention center with the whole idea of I'm meeting Brad Peterson.
That's
And
awesome.
I did love the fact that he was given warning. No, like he had no idea I was coming. He had no idea it was going to fit in the show.
Oh man.
At that stage, we had no idea if it was even going to get on stage. So I've
Oh
traveled
wow.
halfway across the world with equipment at expense, and we still don't even know whether we're going to use this thing or not. So that was my introduction to all of this demo stuff, right?
Yeah.
Was
Oh man. And over the years, it was funny, watching over the years. I mean, having been a consumer of it and just an employee for a little bit, you know, and we can take it way back. We can go back to iForum days, right? Where, before Synergy and before all that. The keynotes, the demos, every year there was a lot of stress put on that. And for some reason, when I got into Citrix, I was like, oh wow, I can see why all these people are stressed out now every time I would show up at iForum because they were like, I was going up for the keynote when we got acquired at Unidesk. And I
yep,
remember it was like the day
I remember
before.
that demo.
It was like the day before and they were still changing the demo systems.
Yeah. Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
just change it.
Absolutely.
They were just like, oh, well, you might have access. We don't know.
Well, and it's kind of funny, right? Because event demos, as you discovered, are
Yeah.
very, very different to
Oh,
your
they're
standard
way
kind of
different.
in-person customer demo or, yeah, even doing an EBC or executive briefing back in the day.
Yeah.
Those demos were designed to be solid, repeatable, resettable, all those kind of things. The event demos and specifically the keynote ones, right? Like they were fly by the seat of your pants. They were, sitting in the back behind the curtains, pulling the strings, waiting for something to fail.
Yeah.
We were honestly just constantly waiting for something to fail because a lot of the time it was alpha code or
Yeah.
barely beta code
Well, and
within.
yeah, you think about in the early days of, back when Microsoft or somebody would introduce some type of new Bluetooth device or Bluetooth on their
Mhm.
phone or whatever. And we all would laugh at how those demos would go sideways, right? Dramatically sideways.
Well, ask anyone. The was it Windows 95 blue screen? That's
Yeah,
the
the
that's the most
window,
memorable demo of all, right?
there's that exactly. There's that. I mean, well, we know exactly how they go sideways because just like every other IT project in the world, you are running it right to the last minute. And
Absolutely.
in these cases, right, I mean, literally you might be showing this piece of code that somebody fixed last night on the way to Sydney just to get it on, oh yeah, as soon as I hit the Wi-Fi, I'll upload it. And they do. And I didn't know from the outside. I thought, oh, I'd go from a small software company to this big company who has all these processes.
Oh,
No.
you thought we'd be organized.
Oh yeah, I thought it would be way more organized than that. Way more organized.
I,
Now,
I I have to admit the organization got better over the years.
yeah, okay, okay. Well, I only had to have small windows, so I only
Yeah.
saw the last of the disorganization. But so one of the things that's been interesting to me, especially in the last 2 years, is as we've the economy opened up after COVID, we were able to go back and do events and stuff now, is that, and I've kind of noticed this across the board, um, the small little events, 20, 30 people events, they don't get a lot of attendance anymore. They tend to be
Hmm.
very, their attendance is way down. But slightly larger, like regional events that you might have expected like 100 or 150 people to come to, like a Kansas City, Omaha type thing, or
Hmm.
a Houston
Yep.
that might include San Antonio and Austin or Dallas. Um, those are getting more attendance, and it's like all the little ones are just going completely virtual. So now you have people that are making demos. Let's say vendors making demos. If you're doing a virtual presentation or you're doing it in person, they're completely, we like to think they're the same, but the timing is different generally, right? And
Hmm.
even what I was told when they made me come up for that one keynote was slow down.
Correct. Yes.
And no matter what, nope, you're still talking too fast, right? Slow down, because in the bigger audiences, it takes the voice long, something like that. But did you have to set up differently for different types of things and events for
Oh,
Citrix or?
oh, definitely. Oh,
Okay.
definitely. So when you think about the different types of demonstrations that we just talked about, right? So you
Hmm.
think about events, and then my job really a lot of the time was to take what we did at that large event and work out how to cascade it down the tree of demonstration environments that we had.
Hmm.
So this
Okay.
meant taking it from the 6 to 8,000 user audience, cascade that down into our briefing centers,
Hmm.
cascade that down into on the road portables.
Okay.
Sideways from the EBC was those mid-level events, so the trade show floor and and
Hmm.
and things like that. So the logistics in doing that from a technology and physical standpoint, that was
Yeah.
just insane back in the day. So
Oh
we're
yeah, I'll
talking
bet. I'll bet before you
210 to
had.
216,
I'll
right?
bet. I'll bet before you had like a good stable internet connection at these events, when you're having to ship hardware everywhere, right? When it,
Absolutely.
yeah, when a small event would tell you, oh, you want 1 megabit? Yeah, that's 10 grand for the day. you would ship them hardware.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah. So
Right.
you
And
had to have, did you have a different hardware spec for all of those?
well, we kind of didn't initially. So probably 2010 was the start of the revolution or the evolution of the physical items needed to run these demos.
Okay.
So we had three workstation laptops that could take 32 gig of RAM. And they were the servers that
Yeah.
we were
Yeah.
shipping around, right? So we had three or four or five of those at any one time, and they were literally the back end units
Mhm.
of the Zen servers and everything else that we were building. And then on top of that, you then had endpoint devices. Now, you kind of touched on it, but the endpoint device was the hardest bit of all of this because you had to get it up on a screen,
Yeah.
right? And when we go back to the event level, the local level, that was easy. That was like a wire into the bottom of the phone, or a Chromecast at the end of the day, or an Apple
Mhm.
server or something like that that would allow you to mirror this
Yeah.
environment.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you're doing the event, you're going through production quality equipment, and they have
Oh,
certain requirements to doing that, whether it's resolutions or whatever it might be, because
yeah.
otherwise the picture doesn't show up,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right? So as you're cascading this tree down to the local SE who has to do this in the field kind of thing,
Yeah.
um,
He's got to show up at a customer event 2 days
and it
from
just
now,
plugs in,
and it
right?
just
And it's
plugs in.
just got
Yeah.
to plug in. So this is where the demo kit came in, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of the community helped me with this as well, where we ended up with a 15-inch laptop bag, effectively, a
Mm.
hard case, and running inside it were Intel Nooks
Okay.
and things like this, and unify networking gear so we could simulate SD-WAN and all
Yeah.
these kind of things. So you couldn't travel with half of the equipment that we were
Yeah.
emulating, right?
Yeah.
So, Eric, Zenat Blog, and these guys, we
Yeah.
built this demo kit community at the end of the day that kind of all shared ideas and brought some of these ideas to life. And he was like one of the first to do Nutanix community on this stuff
Yeah.
and all these kinds of technologies. So, that evolution between probably 2010, 2016
Mm.
was really all about the physical. And we didn't
Yeah.
even think about the virtual world. We didn't think about remote people wanting to see this stuff,
Mhm.
right? COVID hits, 2018 comes along, COVID starts to hit, and all of a sudden we just have to pivot. And we're pivoting briefing centers, we're
Yeah.
we're pivoting guys in the field, and all of a sudden we have this birth of everything has to be virtual, everything has to be the same storyline and the same switching capabilities and all these kind of things. And so guys like Scott Lane, who you know very well, and Adam Mandelbloom and Brian Shepherd, who was my key guy for demonstrations, right?
Yeah.
They were the brains trust of all this stuff leading up to it. They ran the briefing centers ultimately down the track. And all of a sudden, we're all just sitting on a call together going, what do we do? How do we do this, right? And that's where we started looking at streamers, right? How do guys who stream video games and how do guys who stream content online get it out to such wide audiences with real consistency and professionalism as well, right? It had to sound and look good at the end of the day. So we
Yeah.
started diving into OBS and all these other technologies to work it out. And funnily enough, a lot of the storytelling that goes along with the demos, because it's story, it's visuals, and then it's the tech, right? At the end of the day, that story and the visuals and the switching capabilities that it opened up, just the ability to put a different background, so it looked like a scene of the story. So you had a healthcare or you had an education center, and you could lay that behind the demonstration as the indicator of the vertical you were talking to and things like this, right? That's really where it started to evolve, not just technically, but from the story. The stories got better. Yeah, probably between 2010 and 2016, you had to stick the good storytellers on stage. So this was guys like yourself, Chris Fleck, Brad Peterson, obviously, right? At the end of the day, who could stand up there and not just click the buttons on the devices, but they could tell the good story. Yeah, What was
Sure.
Brad's famous one? Wow to how,
Yeah.
right? And
Yep.
things like that. And a lot of that stemmed from the very early days with the R&D guys like Martin Dersma, Adam Jarks, and all these guys in
Yep.
Citrix who stood up as the final keynotes a lot of the time in summits and synergies and things, right? And they would tell ridiculously good stories. It was more about the theatrics and the story a lot of the time than it was the tech
Yeah.
in there. But the virtualizing, that just revolutionized the story again because you had to be super obvious in exactly what you were telling the customer that the demo was related to.
Yeah, there's something to that because and and I hate to say this, we're all guilty of it, right? We get on a meeting, right? I'm scheduled for the next meeting at whatever this hour is. I get on, right? The meeting starts. I've got a cup of coffee over here. Oh, my phone had pinged a minute ago, right? Well, on the screen, somebody's presenting. They're starting their thing. If you get a
Mhm.
group and the attention spans, I'm finding it's like we're doing more online. People are cramming more and more into online. So instead, they're trying to like
Mhm.
communicate via PowerPoint, even if it was possible to try to communicate more via PowerPoint than we have, they're trying,
I
right?
know. I
Yeah.
know.
Versus actually having that conversation or being in person or writing a business letter or something, right? Whatever. Oh, I'm
Mhm.
going to put it in a PowerPoint. And I think that because of that, the demos, one of the things would hear coming to Login VSI, I was pushing really hard was you have to show right away. Here's exactly what you're here for. Here's the punchline. Here's the value.
Yeah.
Get out.
Yeah.
You
No,
you
you're absolutely
can't you
spot on.
can't dance around it. You can't because if they look up and whatever they see on the screen, when they take their eyes off their phone or their email that's on that screen, when they look up, if whatever is on that screen doesn't interest them, they just go right back to their email.
And you're absolutely spot on, right? It's that capturing that attention, keeping that attention for a small period of time, because you only have maybe a 30-minute window in these
Yeah.
things, really. And the demonstration is usually 15 minutes of that.
You would hope, yeah, you would hope that
Yeah.
you get that nice balance, yeah.
So we actually developed a culture around the demonstration groups, where PowerPoint was simply not allowed.
Oh,
So you weren't
nice.
you weren't you weren't even allowed to set the scene of what you were doing with an agenda slide. Like it was
Oh,
just
nice.
we were so anti PowerPoint within that, and that stemmed a lot from the briefing centers, right?
Yeah.
Because they would get bombarded from PMs and product managers and people like that in the room with PowerPoint.
Yep.
But when they walked into the demo space, whatever it was,
Yeah.
it had to be fun. It had to be engaging. It had to be that wow to how
And you've got to do
mentality,
that.
right?
You have to do that. You have to get away from that. I always remember that Rodney Dangerfield movie that, Back to School, where
Hmm.
the guy hands him a paper and he feels it. He goes, it feels about as heavy as a B. Add 40 pages and make it an A. And I thought that every time I've never seen a slide deck that a group of people didn't want to add five more slides to.
Oh,
And,
absolutely.
and slides, they really are. They're great to convey some types of information, but everybody thinks that if I add one more slide, that's the one. It's going to
It's an
close the
improvement,
next
right? It's
deal.
an
Yeah,
improvement every time I add a slide.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
giving them a bit more detail or I'm giving them a bit more of the information they need. And that works to a degree.
Hmm.
Um, but when was the last time you saw 5 slides only in a presentation? Or when was the last time you saw multiple people in a scenario of presenting
Hmm.
on a virtual call, especially, who didn't want to add 13, 14 slides to their
Yeah.
section
Oh
of
yeah, yeah.
a 30 slide setup?
Yeah. And it's funny. It's I had it at Unidesk and later on, even now at Login, if I do a demo, if you see two slides from me, one of them is here's the four things we do. The other one is here's our logical architecture.
Oh,
And
so you even removed the one that a lot of others bring in is who am I?
oh yeah, no, I don't. Yeah, I don't. I'm not important, right? See, that's the other thing. Now let's talk about that. There are presentations where people don't do the who am I at the beginning, right? And to me, it's always been, well, my topic is what's important, right? So I've always just veered
Yeah,
away from that. You know what I
yeah.
mean? Um,
I'm just the voice. I'm just the guy, spruiking at the end of the day.
yeah,
I'm not really important. What's important is the thing I'm showing you that I want you to
yes,
pay attention to.
yeah,
Um, and it's kind of funny because that's part of the evolution of the virtual demo, right?
yeah,
Is
yeah,
V1, I'll call it, version one of all this was kind of us messing around with how do we stick a camera of ourselves down in the bottom corner so it doesn't impact, a portion of the demonstration you're trying to
yeah,
see. Um, by about version 3, I think we all realized that we weren't important. Right? We just weren't important to have enough of shifting that little box around,
yep,
right? Within the structure of that demonstration. It was way more important to just be a voice in the void
yep.
of that demonstration. So it took us a couple of iterations, I think, for us to understand how unimportant we really are to that process. Uh, and how more important the story or the visual was.
Yeah, yeah,
Doing that,
no.
right?
Well, yeah,
The hardest thing, to be honest, Ron, around that evolution from physical to virtual
yeah.
was the hybrid. So
Oh,
that period of time we went through before and after COVID, where you
mhm.
get some people in a room and not everybody. And then
Yeah.
you had to have a mechanism for
To deal with both
displaying it to
ones.
both styles of audiences. That was probably the biggest challenge
Yeah,
because you had TV screens in front of the guys who were local, and then you had virtual versions of that. And you almost
yeah,
had to have a producer kind of sitting there running the virtual bit for
yeah.
you while you were presenting the physical elements of the room.
Yeah,
Right.
especially if you were moving around. I remember doing one that was like half it, or they said it was going to be half and half. Half the team was going to be in a room and half was elsewhere. And when I got to the room, they all had their laptops up. And so
Mm-hmm.
when the meeting started, they're like, well, go ahead and hook to our meeting.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
sitting at a table with 8 other people. And instead of talking to them, I'm looking at my laptop because they're looking at their laptop for an image of me. Yet we're in the same room.
That's
It
right.
was the weirdest thing. Um,
And if your meeting room was lucky enough to have, eagle eye follow me cameras or
yeah,
whatever that you could actually tie into, then the question became, why am I even in the room? Why wouldn't I just do this as a kind of a studio green screen world, kind of like what Citrix did for a long time with their all hands meetings and a lot of
hmm
companies did, right? Where they had
hmm
the executives in front of a green screen in an amphitheater somewhere, which were horrible, by the way,
yeah,
a
they
lot
were
of the
awful.
time. But like the question became, why are the 10 of you in front of me if you're going to
Yeah,
be looking at your laptop to get the best experience out of that? And how do we address that hybrid
yeah.
kind of approach, right?
Excuse me. And it's interesting to me. I mean, the over the last 6 or 8 months, I've kind of started to realize that meeting with customers in person is having an outsized impact compared to pre-COVID, right? Pre-COVID, it was nothing, right? You know
Mm-hmm.
how pre-sales guys are on the road all the time, just shaking hands and they're like politicians, right? They're looking for your vote or your sale or whatever. But now it's funny. We go out and we meet customers or we whiteboard with them, actually get in that same room and whiteboard. Well, what? Oh, here, let me put it up on the screen. I'll show you our system.
Yep.
It's having an outsized impact. It's like that personal kind of connection while all the little interactions have moved to virtual.
Mm-hmm.
Actually sitting down in some customer environment and putting up on their screen your system. I don't know why, but it sees to be having an outsized impact compared to
Well,
what it did
it's a huge
pre-COVID.
impact. It's a much bigger impact. And I think there's a couple of pieces to that
Okay.
that have improved it, right? So I think the collaboration tools have gotten better, right? So if you're
Yeah.
sitting inside their room, the meeting rooms themselves are better
Mhm.
overall. right? In terms of the technologies that are being used, microphones, all these things, right? Um, I think there's a much larger acceptance of this hybrid. We've got to remote some guy in from the middle of nowhere, but 8 of us are going to be sitting at the desk with you. And because of that acceptance, there's a lot more that goes into just throwing the system up instead, right? Show it live, show it the way it is. Forget the song and dance to some degree that we used to tap dance around. But there's a lot more confidence in the tech to do that, right? Yeah, you can bring your laptop into customer A and they can give you an HDMI. You just get it up there and away you go. And you're talking through experience of usage of the tech then, which is the story a lot of the time. And they can just fire questions. Yeah, the one thing about the structured demo back in the day was nobody would ask a question.
Yeah.
Like nobody would stop you mid demonstrate, especially an event level, right? No one's going to stop
Yeah.
a person on stage, right, and ask a question. Those mid-level events we started to, where we were getting that 50 to 100 users, and yeah, you'd fire that off. Or if you went to a Gartner or something like that back in the day, and you had that corner demo kind of set up, and you were doing a 15-minute presentation with it, people would ask questions. In that intimate environment that you get with a customer, they fire questions off, right? And a good story and a good demo a lot of the time can be based upon the track and the rabbit holes and things that you go down. That forms the structure at the end of the day of a good demo. You've just got to be as a presenter and a storyteller adaptable to go in any direction. You've got to understand the environment well enough that if they see something that they want to know more about, you can go down that rabbit hole and come back.
You
Right.
have to be, yeah, that's one of the things about when we talk about pre-sales and the skills that folks on the pre-sale side have, they have to be really wide.
Mm-hmm.
They've got to they've they can't run into a wall of acronyms that they don't understand. They
Yes.
oh, what was that? I don't understand. Nope, they can't do that. Um, because they don't know. They'll sit down with a customer and somebody will throw well, we're about to implement this for our authentication.
Yep.
Well, you had better have been reading the articles on authentication last week. I mean,
That's
that's
correct. That's
just the way
absolutely
it
spot on,
is.
right? And a good pre-sales guy will have that discovery in his back pocket.
Mm-hmm.
He'll know what customer environment he's walking into. He'll know, or
Yep.
she will know the intricacies of the things they're thinking about
Yep.
as a customer, right? Whether it's related to your technologies or not, you will know the spectrum of the things that they're working on, right? And I think a good pre-sales person at the end of the day, they adapt that into what they do, not scramble towards doing that at the
Yep.
end of the day,
Yeah. No
right?
doubt. No doubt.
So, I once had a person, I have a title of ATS these days, right? And it stands for account technology strategist. It's a pre-sales engineer at the end of the day. But I think it was like 2 hours after day one, we were given these new acronyms. And someone just turned around and said, so we're advanced translation services. Because honestly, that's what you do in pre-sales.
I
You
was
are
about to say, I'm
translating,
like,
you're
yeah, it's
translating a
kind of
customer's
close. Yeah.
vernacular, right? You're
Yeah.
translating their terminologies and things into your own to
Yeah.
then take them down the path, right? Of
Yeah.
whatever you're showing them. So yeah, I'm just an advanced translator at the end of the day, right? Because I translate in and I translate out what we do. But
That's a good,
I thought that was absolutely apt at
uh,
the end of the day.
that's a pretty
So
good one. That's not bad. Well,
uh,
I know we've been running for about a half hour here. I wanted to ask you one more question kind of before we sign this off. All these years, the keynotes, the synergies, all the partner events, right? I mean, one of those events, right? I mean, they've all had all these different memorable instances. We all remember Mark and his Mickey Mouse moment. There's all these things that everybody who's been to all the events remember. Was there one demo screw up, snafu, or something interesting that sticks out to you when you think of all those years of iForums or synergies?
I think I think back on a lot of this, Ron. at the end of the day. And, you know, one of the arts of a good demonstration is nobody knows the magician failed his trick, right? At
Okay.
the end of the
Yep.
day, right? So that's
Yep.
one of the arts of a good demonstration is nobody but you, because you designed it, knows it failed,
Knows that
right?
something didn't work. Yep. I've
Absolutely.
had those demos. Okay.
And there's probably three epic failures in the history of my demonstrations across all of these.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, all three of them are on the main stage at a synergy, right?
Okay.
Some of it was our own fault, some of it wasn't. Um, I think the biggest failure versus the biggest scariest moment, the biggest failure is definitely Moscone. I think it was 2012, 2013, one of the Moscones, where I think we just bought the go-to technologies and a whole bunch of things, and we were going to go to webinar, go to training, go to meeting, all on stage. And it was probably the first in a long time where we were relying on the internet,
Mm.
right? So everything up until that point had been on those workstation servers. It was controlled. It was easy. And it was also, I think, the first year we kind of had bloggers in the room, or we had, true mobile internet in the audience with phones and tablets and things like this. And Brad Peterson walks out there, and behind the stage we've got Mark Templeton in the green room, Gordon Payne, these guys waiting on this demo. And my job was to walk out on the other side of the stage and talk about these go-to products. And what we didn't realize is, with 6,500 people in the room, all with their own internet signal, mobile signal, the poor little Wi-Fi that we had up on stage completely shot itself.
Oh.
It couldn't get a signal. We had no internet. And I'm standing out there literally, I might as well have had my pants around my ankles. Like it was just horrible. And Brad's on one side. He's looking at me going, none of this is working. I'm clicking on stuff. It's not happening. We can't bring up the screens you kind of talk about. And and whatever happens in a demo, you just kind of go forward with the next
Yeah.
thing, right?
Yep. You got to
You
keep
have to
going.
step over the failure and keep going, right? You can't acknowledge it. You can't stand there going, oh, let's just try it again, right? You can do that at a local level, right? That's
Yeah,
easy. Give me
yeah,
2 seconds and we'll fix it, right? But on a main stage, there's
yeah.
none of that. You have to keep going. So I walk out there. I'm probably 2 minutes in to what we should be showing as a demo, and I'm just talking through the features, functions, what go to meeting, what go to training offer. And then Brad just looks at me and he just shakes his head. And I'm like,
There's nothing there.
What does that even mean? Like, does that mean you want me to stop and just walk off? Like normally production guys, you get things like stretch it out from the producer on the floor
Yeah,
and,
yeah, yeah.
and things like that. The next minute on the monitor at the very front of it, Brad has typed on the screen that I can see that isn't up on the main
Yeah.
screen, stop and get off stage. So I then quickly wrap it up and I just walk off. It was like a whole 5 minute window that felt
Oh
like it
man.
lasted 3 years, right? While you're
Yeah, yeah,
standing out
yeah.
there. So that was the biggest epic failure of a
Wow.
demo. Like we literally
I
just, it
I
stopped working completely,
I
right?
could see it. I could see it, right? You get, especially in the early days like that, in the
Yeah,
teens and
yeah.
commercial Wi-Fi in those big distributed areas like that,
The
and
fallout backstage of Gordon and Mark to us was
oh
outrageous. Right? They weren't mean about it, but there was this comment of it will never happen again.
yeah, yeah. I
Right.
could see
So
that. I could see
that's
that.
where we started engaging Wi-Fi jammers and all sorts of things, right? To keep the stage healthy. The
I,
scariest one, if I've still got a minute or so,
sure.
is do you remember when the original storefront came out?
Ooh, God.
And it was called Dazzle by Mark.
Dazzle. It was
The
Dazzle.
Dazzle
Yeah, yeah,
demo, right?
yeah.
It was this
Dazzle demo.
green bubble web interface that we had,
Yes.
right? So that's the scariest demo we ever did. And it's not because of the name, and everybody remembers it because of the name, because we couldn't understand why it was called Dazzle. We had no idea what. I think it was like 30 seconds behind stage before we went on. The Dazzle was decided on. But what we had, and I'm not sure if the community remembers him because he was behind the scenes, but Richard Hayton. was the product owner
Yeah,
for
I don't remember.
that product in Citrix. So Richard, we built up all the backstage. It was all running really well. We were getting updates to that 2 minutes, 3 minutes before we were walking on stage to do those demos from marketing. Just the imagery was being updated in the HTML and things like this, that it reflected the right things and right icons, because half the icons were fake for
Yep,
that demo,
yep,
right?
yep.
And in the front row is Richard Hayton on a laptop writing the code as we're all walking out on stage to demo this thing. So he's literally got a laptop and he's building the HTML, he's building all the code, he's building everything. And he, within 10 seconds of Mark opening his mouth, sends it to the server for us to actually access. That was the scariest demo we have ever done.
I would be a little worried. I'd be,
Oh, I'm sitting next to him, watching him, and I've got to walk up the stairs and on stage to do the demo kind of thing. And I'm just like going, this is going to be another go-to again. Like, this is not going to work. So that was from a timing perspective, and whether we even had a demo at the end of the day
yeah.
under our own steam, that was the scariest by far. And yeah, you talk to, I still get the pleasure of talking to people like Mark and Brad and everybody. And you ask Mark even, he's like, oh, no, I had faith. It was all good. Yeah, it was Richard.
It's gonna be fine.
Absolutely.
Don't worry.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's a good story, man. I love it. I love it. Well,
Yeah, as you say, a lot of people didn't get to see a lot of that. They didn't get
no,
to know about it even, right? We didn't disclose a lot of this stuff back in the day.
of
So
course not. Of course not. You know,
no,
and
no, 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 no. Everything was perfect. You know, I
oh
can
man.
count. I can't count on two hands how many failures Brad and I had that he just glossed over so well
Oh yeah.
within the device failures and things like this, where
Yep.
yeah, he would literally just be talking and he, yeah, all of a sudden you think he's doing a demo and he just puts it down on the table. And that was my cue that something had gone completely wrong. But he would just continue the story. He would just walk to the next section of the stage and he'd, you
Yeah.
know, and things like that. But
Skip ahead.
yeah,
Here's where I need
yeah.
to be right now.
There were a lot of learnings though. Out of all of that, there were so many learnings and things. You know, don't do tokens to an iWatch for doing things. Scott Lane, if you're listening, on top of that. So
Uh,
yeah, a lot of that was good.
that's
Uh,
awesome, man.
and
That's good
we
stuff.
had a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun. I got to work with so many technical and non-technicals, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Without going too long into this one, but the hardest demo I ever had to set up was for Al Montserrat because he was a sales guy. So I literally had to make it so that he couldn't fix anything on stage. It had to be perfect. And it wasn't. As live demos go, he managed to click on something he shouldn't have and ended up in a rabbit hole he didn't know how to get back out of,
Good
right?
old Al.
And things like that. So the hardest demos are always the non-technical people. Yeah, how do you get? I was blessed because Mark was semi-technical,
Yeah.
right? Mark Templeton, had racks of computers in his house, and he was technical, even though he was marketing and things like this. But he had some idea,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he was very cheeky about it. Like his very last demo for Citrix was the one where we stuck the phone up on stage. We had thought we had taken every device off him because he was notorious for just pulling devices out of pockets, right? And that was Brad's jacket, by the way. That's where all that came from, was Mark's pull things out of pockets. But he literally looked straight down the camera we had for pointing the phone to on the table. It was a little webcam. And the idea was he had to put it to the camera so he could click on whatever it was.
Yeah.
And he looked straight down the camera at me and winked and then pulled his own phone out of it,
Uh,
which wasn't connected, wasn't Wi-Fi, wasn't, tested in any possible way, and tried to do the demo off it. And that was it. That was his salute goodbye to me, was to, mess with me on the last demo.
they see, but that's classic, right? I mean, that's
That
some
was
old
Mark
school
to a T,
stuff there. That was Mark to a T.
right?
It was. It
Yeah,
was.
and we had a lot of that shenanigans that went on, especially in rehearsals, like where
Yeah.
people would just pull cables on people, and so it didn't work, and the production guys would pull their hair out. Jeff and the guys that ran literally every synergy I ever worked at would just pull their hair out. They really would.
Oh man. Yep. They shouldn't allow us around normal people, man. It's
Oh no, No.
You know,
No.
we're pitchmen that have some technology knowledge. That's our problem. Billy
Yeah, I
Mays with
am.
computer degree,
I
you
am.
know.
I am amazed we're all out in front of customers and things like that.
I know, right? I know. Well, this has been good, man. It's been great catching up, and I know that people are going to love some of those stories. That's why I wanted to get some of them out of you, you know, and the Mark Templeton thing where he winks at you and then whips out his own phone. I'm sorry, that's pretty good. We should snip that as a short and send it to him, right? You know.
We should. We should.
Uh, but thanks a lot, and it's been great catching up. Talk to you later.
Great to be on. Thanks very much.